Because when trans rights are under attack, what do? Stand up, fight back! For decades before I came out, and as I began my advocacy, trans people it was never good. It was as a joke. It was
Washington, D.C. What's up, check? Hey, check.
Woman with a small toddler who's forced to seek refuge in a women's Trans lives matter.
Your manner. Okay. Stay right where you are. Don't move.
Just turn around.
People take a picture. Come on. I saw you. On this side.
You're about to retire?
Yeah, you have the only sound system that's working. Paid for by the Heritage Foundation.
So I wanted to address the crowd. My name is Ismail. I'm director of the Islam and Religious Freedom section at the Religious Freedom Institute. We're a multi-faith organization that exists to protect the religious freedom of everyone.
Yeah, totally.
That's terrible. We filed the brief in this case in order to support the family, a faith-based family. You should talk to the police about it. I can't help you. I can't help you now. So we filed a brief in this case to support the right of a faith-based Christian family to run its business as it wished. And we have to, as Americans, find a way to find some middle ground where we respect one another. So your right needs to be respected, but you should also respect the right of those who choose to run their businesses in the way that they see fit. And that's the American way.
Go home! Church, 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 go home! home! Turks go home! Go home! Turks go home! Turks go home! Turks go home! Turks go home!
To run their organizations in the way that they wish to run them. And so I ask God to bring healing to this country and to stop the division. And I ask God to bring healing to this country. Thank you for having me, and may God give victory to the right side.
So that's why people are changing.
Homophobes go home! Homophobes
Turks go home!
Turks go home! Turks go home! Turks go home! Turks go home! Turks go home! Turks go home!
Protect fairness for women. 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 Dangerous times. We have been sold a lie, a terrible lie. The lie that a man is a woman if he tells us he is. The lie that a young woman distressed with her own body is somehow really a man. The lie of such magnitude it is hard to believe that all our major institutions have all been thoroughly complicit in promoting and indeed enforcing something so patently untrue and so devastating.
one of yours?
I don't like you. I don't care. I have been told to go home. The rights of women to be women is being denied. And create a world in which race, gender, class are all managed, and we all see each other in full human value. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. This reality of executive director of North Carolina Coalition spent a lifetime serving and protecting traditional values. We shall overcome someday. We're here today to ask the U.S. Supreme Court to restore sanity and the rule of law. Yet, in these three cases, the lower courts have effectively redefined sex to include gender identity and sexual orientation. It's unfair for girls and for women and for business owners to have to rely on what the law says. Redefining sex to mean gender identity creates
So another little light, which is, I know it's tiny.
opportunities. It was not
So you want to see the pink, or the ones you say really protect women?
Unite us. You can't break us to make us more great. Tell the bigots and the gun nuts, every greedy billionaire, let's make America more free and fair. God help America. What? Through this nightmare.
amazing. I love them.
Nothing wrong with that.
The LGBT Ohio flag.
Yep.
Trans women are women. 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 Are women. Trans women 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 are women.
Okay, good to see you, Patrick.
And it's like,
I think we should have a meeting where we just talk about yeah, I think we need to have specific conversations
I'm with Muzi and the producer and reporter. Would you mind?
I think we need another, forum where we just talk about civil rights and all the
have an expression that murder doesn't not discrimination. But it should be used for folks who are comfortable in their space and what they need. For me, that is, I use it for my activism. I love what I do. I love changing the world. But on my own time, I'm just la black woman from a normal neighborhood that just doing what she got to do.
I posted an Instagram story and tagged the person.
Good to see you there. We're still here. We're still standing, and I hope you're right.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I got it. Thank you. Yay.
So how are you? And good to see you. You know what?
Can we get like Ash Carter to testify? Yeah, step up.
It's not like I don't have to. I can also move myself. Without faking the out. I'm like, no, what do I do now? I'm a speaker, and there's 7 people there who be like, yes, I also
So that class starts, it's a weird off semester
Standing
class.
down,
It's online course. The rest
As
of
soon as she
the
was done speaking, like I can't stand by this.
American religious history, which is awesome because it's a totally post-colonial perspective. And so
there's a list, like, well, I'm on it. Yes, I too am on it. Like, I'm waiting for at least 5 people have to say I'm on it. Like, we're all, like, everyone who's here is from somewhere. It's like, you see how we're all really scripted out and it's really fun.
Today, we are proud to show our support for the Amy Stevens and Amy Amy was a model of simple just doing our best. But instead of rewarding her dedication, simply for being now Amy is and all of us here know today that is her paycheck. It is illegal and sadly against the crime on this case. Amy is just help us and this is not a safety net. Trans people, particularly black and brown trans people in this country, continue to be tremendous fired and their promotion and experiencing treatment in this case because of their gender identity. So I pass the resources that's why I told us that in front of the court we staff 30 local
She's over there.
I was talking to Sabrina. She wanted to see my art and just about
How are you doing today?
have that like one.
I'm off on Tuesdays.
Last time I was there, I found my favorite hiker.
Church, go home! Church, go home! Church, go home! Church, go home! Church, go home!
I'm like, did you lose your sister?
With the Trump administration's relentless attacks on our protections, passing the Equality Act is vital. We encompass our right to democracy. We must stay vigilant. The time is now. We will persevere and we will achieve transparency.
Don't have the associated press. Just get a picture. It'll be all right.
Congress passed a joint rally. DC marijuana justice. These laws. Better than the guy smoking a joint in the cabinet. We haven't got lunch. Let's go. What's for lunch today? Any Shake Shack? No, we don't.
I already had Shake Shack.
No, we'll go to the burger joint. This is good. Thank you. Hi. I mean, the other one's kitty. Hamburger.
Just get some chips. Get some chips.
Funyuns.
Pat wants video too, by the way. Normally it's pride flag.
This is amazing.
Sign survey. I'm not sure if I'm reading. No one said I couldn't. My contract said I didn't say anything about me taking signs from a protest. I have. Nothing came up about that.
Go attend a briefing about climate and refugees. Step on. You don't know where. You could just ask somebody if you can help them. You have water. You have what? Water. Sorry. You open the press?
Excuse me?
I'm not fine. They will have to stand on.
Is this working? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Test, test. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Test, test. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Does that help you? How's it going, guys? Check, check. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. Can you hear me? Is that working for you? Is that working for you? Cool.
Can we just try and...
yeah, I mean...
I don't want that big because that's the only thing I got, but if we had a little stand here...
A little stand to drop it down here, you think?
Do you have something on you?
I didn't... No, I don't have a stand like that. I mean, we could do...
Let's take that.
Why don't we...
See, I don't have any gaff tape because I was...
Ooh, I didn't... Ooh, you know what
That's too big. It's like, I'd love to just, even if it were like right here, if we just gaffed it.
Yeah, let me see what
Do you have any gaff tape?
In the car.
Yeah, I don't have... Someone here, well, we can borrow some. Just thinking of,
Want me to hold it?
if I literally just kind of get it right in there.
I guess so.
Do me a favor? Hold that for a second, I'll just get one more. Go, and let's just see how that sounds. And that's taped on there, right? Yeah.
We can't have it fall. So.
Yeah, no, it won't fall. So.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. This is an unofficial test. Yes, I'm just going to keep talking until everybody seems like they got what they need here. We'll see what the outcome of the cases are in a little bit. Good, 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 good. Thank you.
Look live to one of our networks. I can talk about all over. Don't worry, I'm gonna be a little worried. Boys can go in and use the girls' restroom. In England right now, there are girls who are skipping school because they're afraid to use the restroom. And also we have things like women's shelter, where some men are using the shower inside the women. So the court has a long way to consider here that just whether they are going to be discriminating against homosexuals and transgender. They also have to worry about false trans. But I think it's okay. Yeah, let me think about that. No activity behind here, right? Nothing's coming out. Oh yeah. As soon as you guys go, I'll go pick that thing up. Move. I gotta pick it up. It looks like people are coming. Yeah, we're gonna try to get some.
I do not. I wasn't supposed to be coming. I was supposed to be on the street counter with a jacket, I don't have a hat. I'm alright, thanks. Good. Well done.
How is that not good? I mean, what alternative service would I be nice to? Well, they come down an elevator to 6 floors. What we can't see on the other side of the stone is the ramp all the way down. I see.
Flight attendants late. Because the Department of Justice Attorney in El Francisco argued both cases, they stayed in, and I imagine that's what the ACLU attorneys did as well. And then the Alliance of Independent Attorney will come after Harris as well. So they'll probably come out together. Yeah, I'll introduce myself today. In about 10 minutes, sir. I do that kind of now. All right, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, no problem.
Good morning. About their faith. This morning we had arguments in Harris v. EEOC. John Birch, Vice President of Appellate Advocacy for Alliance Defending Freedom, argued the case. He'll speak this morning. But first, we have Tom Rost, owner of Harris Funeral Homes, and Nancy Rost, owner of Harris Funeral Homes. Tom?
Thank you. My name is Tom Rost, owner of RG and GR Harris Funeral Homes. Americans and American businesses should be able to rely on what the law says. We're hopeful the Supreme Court will uphold that basic right for everyone. Our business exists to serve grieving families. There is no time in life more difficult than after losing a loved one. For more than 100 years, my family has had the honor of coming alongside those walking that difficult road, helping thousands of families in the Detroit area begin the journey towards healing. Now my family's livelihood and our legacy hang in the balance before the Supreme Court. And what the court decides will impact people across the country. Our company has a professional code of conduct and sex-specific dress code to ensure that families can focus on processing their grief. In 2007, we hired a male funeral director who agreed to follow those policies. Nearly 6 years later, the employee gave me a letter expressing an intent to violate the dress code by dressing and presenting as a woman when working with grieving families. I felt deep concern for the employee. I care about all the people who work for me. They're part of my family. That's why I intervened to save the employee's job a few months earlier. I spent a couple of weeks thinking over what the employee's proposal meant for everyone involved, including my other employees and clients. Funeral directors are the face of a funeral home. They are often the first people you meet after a loved one has died. We created the dress code decades ago for the benefit of the families with whom we interact at such an emotional time. After much thought, I determined we could not go along with the employee's proposal. It was a difficult choice, but I felt it was in the best interest of the grieving families our business serves. Even though I acted in accord with federal law in creating and applying my dress code, the government sued us. And although the government has now changed course and agrees that we didn't violate the law, the ACLU continues its efforts to punish us. The ACLU is trying to use my grandfather's family business as a pawn to achieve a larger political goal that it has been unable to achieve in Congress, where this issue belongs. In the past century, our family's business has survived 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and a decade-long economic downturn in the city we call home. Through it all, we've been committed to serving our neighbors. But now we face severe penalties because the ACLU is trying to change the law out from under us. We're hopeful the Supreme Court won't impose such unjust punishment on us. All of us should be able to rely on what the law says. Thank you very much.
What was your name?
Tom Ross.
Hello, I'm John Bursch. I'm the Alliance Defending Freedom attorney who represented Tom and Nancy Rost in court today. I have a brief prepared statement. I'll make some remarks about what happened in the courtroom today for those of you who weren't inside, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Americans should be able to rely on what the law says. Yet for the past 6 years, our clients, Tom Rost and Harris Funeral Homes, have been targeted for doing just that. First, it was unelected government officials. Now it is the ACLU that seeks to redefine sex in federal law, a change that Congress has repeatedly rejected. Our federal law prohibiting discrimination because of sex, Title VII, is a promise that women will not be treated worse than men and men will not be treated worse than women. The law's text does not mean that employers must treat biological men as women. To redefine sex creates unfair situations for women and girls and undermines nearly 50 years of advances for women. In Alaska, city officials tried to force a women's shelter to allow a man identifying as a woman to sleep in the same room mere feet away from women who have been raped, trafficked, and abused. In Connecticut, 2 boys identifying as girls have taken 15 state championship titles in the girls track and field division in the past 2 years, taking victories away and state titles that were usually held or previously held by 9 different girls. And when an official was asked about that unfairness, her response, girls have the right to participate, but not the right to win. In this very case, Tom is being punished for having the audacity to apply a sex-specific dress code based on an employee's biological sex. And we're hopeful that the court will uphold the law. Now, in court today, the justices across the bench were troubled by the fact that the ACLU's argument would eliminate all sex-specific policies in the workplace, whether they be sex-specific showers, dress codes, restrooms, sports teams. Every single one of those things would have to go. Justice Ginsburg observed that unlike other classifications, certain distinctions require treating men and women differently. That should be patently obvious to all of us. Justice Alito noted that Congress is already working on this issue, and he questioned whether courts should be in the business of rewriting the law. Chief Justice Roberts said the exact same thing. Courts aren't in the business of judicially updating statutes that Congress is working on and has not yet changed. Finally, Justice Alito recognized the problem with the sports teams, that if you eliminate any differences between the sexes and men are treated as women, then men have the right to take the place on the girls' sports team because, but for the fact they were born men, they would be able to be with the women and shower with them after the game is over. So I don't think the justices were very enthusiastic about what the ACLU was saying today. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Mr. Bursch, how do you get past the idea that this isn't sex stereotyping? Because they seem to really be stuck on what happened with Price Waterhouse 30 years ago.
Yeah, Price Waterhouse was a very different case. First, the Supreme Court in Price Waterhouse did not say that there is such a thing as a claim for sex stereotyping. That doesn't appear in the statute. The statute prohibits discrimination because of sex. It does not prohibit discrimination because of sex stereotyping. But the main point of the court's ruling there was that sex stereotyping could be used as evidence that a woman was being treated worse than similarly situated men. And that's not what's happening here, because we have a man who refuses to comply with a sex-specific dress code compared to women who would comply with the sex-specific dress code. They are not similarly situated, and so Price Waterhouse actually works in our favor. If you accept the ACLU's argument that it is always stereotyping to assume that a man who identifies as a woman must be treated as a woman, then again, every sex-specific policy that we have in our culture is gone. No sex-specific restrooms, no showers, no overnight accommodations, no sports teams. They all have to go. That's why the ACLU is incorrect. Other questions?
Justice Gorsuch said the text of this was a close call. What do you make of that?
We don't think the text is a close call. It's only a close call when you focus on the test that the ACLU has adopted. The ACLU looks at the text of the statute and says, well, if you wouldn't have applied this policy but for someone's sex, then it must be illegal. And so what they would say is, if you have a man who wants to be in the women's shower, but for the fact that he was born a man, he should be allowed to go there. Therefore, it's discrimination. But that's not what Title VII says. Title VII prohibits discrimination because of sex. That means treating women worse than men, or vice versa, because of their sex. And when you apply that test, no one could say that the employee here was treated worse than a similarly situated woman, because women were not allowed to dress as men when meeting with grieving clients any more than Stevens was allowed to present as a woman when meeting with grieving clients. Other questions? Okay. Yes.
Based on what you heard from the line of questioning and comments made, where do you think your case stands?
It's a very difficult job to predict where the U.S. Supreme Court is going to go. I'm happy that the Justice has heard the many concerns that we have, the arguments that we made based on the plain text of the statute, and that they understand that if unelected government officials are allowed to make up the law in accordance with their own policy preferences, that will hurt everyone, because all American businesses and all Americans should be able to rely on what the law says, not what someone would like it to be. Yeah, the parade of horribles refers to the fact that you can't have sex-specific policies under the ACLU's theory. And in other cases, you use things like parade of horribles to dismiss something that may or may not come true. But what we're talking about here is actually happening right now. As I mentioned, in Connecticut, girls are losing spots on the podium and in the finals of state track and field meets because someone has interpreted sex to include men who identify as sex. The situation involving the women's shelter, that actually happened in Alaska. And we had to go and get a federal court to get an injunction to stop the city from forcing the shelter to allow a man sleeping with the women. So these things are not a parade of horribles. These are actual things that are happening right now, and they are the natural result when you redefine sex as a matter of a judicial decision as opposed to a congressional action.
Do you have anything else? All right, John mentioned that there are other cases, and in fact we have those clients here. Today we have Alexis Lightcap. She's a student at Boyertown High School who challenged her school's transgender policy that opened bathrooms to members of the opposite sex. We have Grace, a student from Arizona, who is an athlete who's been forced to compete against men. We also have Bianca Solo. Her daughter is one of those that John mentioned, who's now competing against boys in Kennewick. So thank you much for being here. If you have any other questions, you can reach out to media@adflegal.org. media@adflegal.org. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
This is my wife, Nancy.
I'm sorry, I didn't know you were.
Kate, this is Kate. Nice to meet you. I'm so excited. In high school.
to get down. I mean, it's not very nice. Just leave it up. Right there. I can do that. That's fine. Although now it's sticking up. Is that okay? Yeah.
This is such an important issue for us that affects so many people across our nation. We're talking about millions and millions of people that go to work every day fearful for being fired for who they are, how they identify, and who they love. And that's wrong. Homophobia is wrong, plain and simple. Again, thank you for being here and allowing us to tell our story.
My name is Brian Sutherland, and along with my partner Tom Yu, we proudly represent Gerald Bostock. We're very happy to have come to the court today and present this very important case. Questions were wonderful, and the court was engaged, and we are very much looking forward to a uniform interpretation of the law so that people like Gerald and everybody else will be protected from discrimination in the workplace, and so that they will have the right to work regardless of who they are or who they love. Thank you.
Next, we're going to have Amy Stevens come down, plaintiff. Amy.
She's up.
I would like to say thank you for all the support that I'm getting. I appreciate each and every one of you. I'm glad to have been able to bring this before the courts, and what happened to me was wrong, and hopefully we can fix that and correct it from this point on. Thank you.
Next, we're going to have Chase Strangeau, attorney with the ACLU and Laverne Cox.
Go together?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I'm still catching my breath from coming out of arguments that obviously were an incredible moment for our community. When you discriminate against someone like me, someone who is transgender, that is necessarily because of my sex. It is because of the idea that I am the wrong kind of man. It is because of the idea that just because I was assigned female at birth, I could be discriminated against for living as who I am. And that was the truth that was spoken in the courtroom today. And this is a historic day for calling in all of the trans people who have lived and died because they did not fit people's expectations of what it meant to be a man or a woman. And we are a testament to the fact that we are covered under the law, and I hope that the justices see that.
Hi, my name is Laverne Cox, and I am so incredibly honored and overwhelmed that I got to be present on this historic day where history was made, where the very first case involving transgender civil rights was argued before the Supreme Court of the United States. And I hope no matter what our justices decide, that Americans know that it should not be okay to discriminate against someone simply for being who they are. If we do not win this case, then the people, then our legislature needs to make it clear that discrimination against anyone because of who they are should not be the way that we live our lives here in the United States of America. Thank you so much to Amy Stevens, to Mr. Bostock and the family, the Zarta family, for their courage. It is everyday people who have the courage to stand up who can make a difference. These are everyday people who have stood up and said, we will not take this kind of discrimination. Every single one of you out there can stand up and make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Laverne. And now we have David Cole, National Legal Director of the ACLU, argued for the plaintiffs.
So our argument was simple. The argument is that when Congress passed Title VII, it intended to make sex irrelevant to people's ability to succeed at work. When Amy Stevens was fired because of who she is and not because of her performance at work, she was denied what Congress sought to give. And all we are asking the court to do is to recognize that transgender people have the same rights under our civil rights laws as everybody else, not to be discriminated against because of their sex.
Mr. Cole, the court seemed to be veering into a lot of discussion, though, about bathrooms and societal upheaval. What was your response to all that?
My response to bathrooms and societal upheaval is that there will not be societal upheaval. Transgender people live among us. There are 1.5 million transgender Americans in this world. There were transgender lawyers in that courtroom, and the transgender men were following the men's dress code and using the men's restroom, and the transgender women were following the women's dress code and using the women's restroom, and the sky did not fall. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you. We're just going to shift. Next, we're going to have Bill Moore and Melissa Zarda, other plaintiffs in the case. Okay, so we have Bill Moore first.
I'm going to get out of the way.
So, thank you all for your support. We had an amazing day in court. I am certain that the Supreme Court's going to see our side. They know that we have these rights. They know that Don was fired. For Don being fired was wrong. And I am certain, with the help of our amazing attorneys and staff today, that we're going to have a powerful win whenever we find out what the Supreme Court rules. Thank you all, and don't forget that we need your support for the Equality Act. So please call your senators and please get support so we can get this Equality Act passed both in the House and the Senate. Thank you.
Now we have Melissa Zarda.
Hi. When my brother contacted me and told me he was fired for being himself, it was devastating. I hope that the Supreme Court will agree with us that these protections have already been in place under Title VII and will not roll back the rights of such a huge portion of the population. It's clear that the vast majority of Americans agree that these protections have already been in place. Thank you very much.
And I saw when you were rolling down that you could see the crowd chanting your name. What was that like?
Very positive, very uplifting to know that all these people are behind me.
What did you think of oral arguments today?
Elizabeth, this is Elizabeth.
I think we'll have to wait and see, but I'm optimistic. So we can only hope for the best.
Thank you so much, Amy. Amy, I'm Melissa with the
Hello, I'm so proud to be here. What can I say?
say that hasn't been said before. I met Don Zarda, who came into my office in 2010, and I was so happy that Bill and Melissa were willing to take the case further, even with Don gone. And to quote a famous lawyer, never give up, never give up, never give up.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sure.
Like I was saying earlier, we just hope for the best and see what they come down with.
No, you're optimistic. Thank you so much. It's great to meet you in person.
Thank you.
I'm just
ready for your close up. It looks like a major close up.
This was a moment to show that we have these
Get up to the steps and take photos there. The marshals may let us do it. They may not.
Did Yola take place back?
You want your bag? Actually, keep holding it. Yep.
Let's go.
Yesterday was a good day.
So you got your 22-pound camera.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I have a question for you. Is Melissa here? Yeah, I thought she was. I thought someone told me she was really so sweet. She's swearing in Navy. Okay. Like every
No, we're ready to go. I just